Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. Very excited. Oh, and I'm your host, Stephen Peinecker, and I'm very excited to have back on my program Chris Jensen, author of the book Obscure Mormon Doctrine, Uncommon Beliefs of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this is really cool because last year I was scrolling through Reddit on one of the Mormon subreddits, and you were talking about your book. So I contacted you and say, hey, dude, why don't you send me a copy? And of course, you and I, we didn't know each other. We didn't even know each other's names. And we both kind of took on endeavors last year that led to you publishing a book and me, of course, starting my YouTube/podcast channel. And what a year it's been. Chris, thank you so much for coming back onto the program.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me back on.
So just real quick, folks, just a reminder, the merch store, mormonbookreviews.com. You can get, we have tons of stuff from telephone cases to iPod cases to hoodies. My friend Nathan Smith just bought a hoodie the other day. So if you want to support the channel with the merch store, mormonbookreviews.com. For those of you who support me on Patreon, on PayPal, I want to thank you very much for your financial support. Please, if you like what I'm doing, consider becoming a patron or somebody who just wants to make a direct contribution via PayPal. So Chris, one of the reasons we're having you back on is, first of all, I want to hear about what it's been like for a year now publishing your book, what kind of responses you got. But one of the reasons I'm having you back on is because you just recently released an audio version of your book. Is that correct?
That's right, Stephen. I'm very excited about it. Just last week, the audio version came out. So, you know, you and I talked about this. It's kind of a logical time for us to meet again for two reasons, at least. It's been exactly a year since the book was published. And then just last week, the audio version came out. So it's the 1 year anniversary of the book. And then I'm excited about the audio version. And so the reason, I mean, I wasn't sure about the audio version. I had read a couple books about self-publishing, and they recommended releasing, you know, a book that you're self-publishing in as many formats as possible. But I thought that the audio version would be more difficult than it was. And so I ignored that advice and I didn't publish the audio version, thinking it would be a hassle and probably expensive. And I wanted to see, first of all, I wanted to see how the book was received. And if nobody read it and it was ignored, I wasn't going to put the money into the audio version. But in fact, what has happened is the book has done well. I mean, it's all relative. It's not on the New York Times bestseller list yet, but it's done well in the sense that it hasn't tailed off. It's held steady at about, let's say, 2 books a day.
Wow.
And then, you know, which I think is pretty good for a self-published book on something as non-mainstream as Obscure Mormon Doctrine.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's slightly picked up. And so that surprised me because I figured, and I had read this, I figured what would probably happen is there would be an initial interest for, you know, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months if I was lucky. And then the interest would wane and that would be it. And I'd probably have to, you know, go to the next chapter in these books that I'd read on how to revive your book sales. And that has actually never happened with my book. So eventually about 10 months or about 2 months ago, after about the book having been released for 10 months, I started looking into the audio option, thinking, well, if it's selling, I might as well get into this for the long haul. And, you know, once I invest the money and the time in the audio version, it'll be there forever. And there's you know, so I don't know if I'm getting ahead of you here, but
no, actually, I'm curious. So what I would like for you to do is what we're going to do is I want you to explain, because there are people probably who are aspiring authors who are considering self-publishing a book. And I'd like you to explain, first of all, how does one go about doing an audiobook? And like, for instance, you're not the reader, you have somebody else reading it. So explain to me the process of actually setting up an audiobook.
So it's actually very easy. There's a website called ACX, And so if you just type in ACX or you type in audiobook, Amazon, it'll take you to this website, ACX, I think, .com. And there must be a connection between that and Amazon. I've never researched it, but they basically make it as easy as they can, just like Kindle Direct Publishing does when you're trying to publish your own book. They've learned over the years that it's in their interest to make it as easy as possible for somebody like me. And all you do is, you upload a few pages from the transcript, and then you put it out to bid, and people contact you, narrators contact you if they're interested in potentially narrating the book. And so in my case, maybe 7 or 8 people contacted me, and they read, they read 2 or 3 pages of the transcript. And what you can do is you can indicate the type of voice that you're looking for. And so I chose authoritative.
Okay, good.
Which I thought probably made sense with my book. And sure enough, I got 6 men and one woman, and the men sounded almost too authoritative. I mean, it was interesting because I felt like I was back in the temple or a general conference, listening to a general authority.
Huh.
And it kind of creeped me out a little bit. I thought it was, or a voice directly from heaven. It was that authoritative. Some of these voices, they were excellent, but a bit too much. And so I ended up choosing the woman.
Okay. It
Because she has an amazing voice, and I thought it was just perfect for my book. And that's how it went. And so I chose her, and then you ask them what, how much they charge per recorded, I think, hour.
Mm-hmm.
And you negotiate that, and then you agree on a price, and then you send them sort of a sample that they do, or they record maybe 20 minutes, and you check it and you okay it, and you indicate any changes. And once you've okayed that initial 20-minute recording, then they go ahead and do the whole thing.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. I didn't realize it was that easy, that you can actually get it set up to that easily. I think that's so cool. And so those of you who have self-published a book, there are avenues that you can use through apparently Amazon, some affiliation through Amazon. And so it all gets set up for you. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that information with the audience.
Yeah, it's called ACX, and it couldn't be easier. And of course, you can always decide to do it yourself, which is another option. But I wanted somebody that was a little bit more professional, and she had her own sound editor, and she does this professionally. And I think most of these people literally do this full-time professionally. So it probably makes sense if you're in it for the long term, and you think that the sales will benefit from the audio version, having an audio version, then it's probably worth just finding somebody.
So I'm going to ask you a quick question, and this is going to completely catch you off guard, but I'm wondering if there's a way that you could pull up the audio and I could do share screen, and we could play it for our audience. If you can do that, do it. If not, we can. I want to also, before we do that, I figured this would be a good time to ask you other questions, and then if you want to get it set up, we can do that too. And I'm going to do the share screen. So if you want to do it, we can get it set up.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to just
then we won't do it
without any warning.
Yep, no problem. I should have thought of this beforehand.
But
either way.
But Stephen, listen, this is the answer. If you go to Amazon.com and you look up the book Obscure Mormon Doctrine, it has a sample.
Oh, great. Excellent.
And so if you go to the audio version, you can listen to about 10 minutes of her narrating.
Okay, great. That's awesome. So check that out. There's the sample so you can hear how that goes. That's really cool. Okay, now you wrote this book. You did some research. You decided, of course, what is the most fascinating things about your story is that what I really liked about this book was I actually thought it was written by a true blue Mormon. It seemed like a relatively orthodox person who's very knowledgeable of the subject, who wasn't afraid to maybe talk about some of the more obscure and controversial things. One of the things I love about this book, and I make this real clear early on, was this is kind of like a obscure Mormon doctrine for dummies. It just gives you like a an index of the, small chapters, just giving you. So I think if you're interested, especially evangelicals and those who are part of the restoration, who want to know more about these things, it's a great resource to begin researching different doctrines within Mormonism. And so I just think this is a great tool to have if you're interested. So I just thought it was so interesting that you decided to write it in a way where you're not trying to be biased and you're not trying to attack, but you're just literally saying, okay, I'm going to publish an objective, as best as you can, objective resource for people to use to try to study and understand Mormon doctrine. And the question I have for you is, this book's been out for a year now. What kind of response have you been getting from people and kind of feedback from people who have been reading the book?
Well, generally positive, but not 100%. So like I said, it's sold maybe 500 books so far within a year. And then it's sold, there's something called, what's it called? Kindle Unlimited. And so if you subscribe to that and you pay for that, then you can read for free. You're paying a certain monthly fee, and there's been a lot of pages read via Kindle Unlimited, like 40,000 pages of the book have been read via Kindle Unlimited. And so the sales have been pretty good, but then there's been a huge response within that Kindle Unlimited option. And, I've got about 40 reviews, which I think is quite a bit for the first year.
Yeah.
And the average rating is 4.3, which I think is also quite good. Especially when you consider the fact that exactly what you said, the book, and this is something that throws some people off. The book doesn't have an obvious target audience, and that hurts it potentially in terms of sales and in terms of reviews. If you go to, for example, if you go to Amazon.com and you look at the latest book from President Nelson, every review is five stars, which is exactly what you would expect, because the intended audience is devout Mormons, and they're going to read the book and they're going to give it 5 stars. And then, and if you did the opposite and you wrote an anti-Mormon book, again, you would attract critics, and those that read it would give it 5 stars. And my book is neither one nor the other. It's in the middle. And so it confuses some people because they read it, and I'm not giving them, I'm not giving them my angle. I'm not giving them any angle. I'm just giving them the information, and they have to decide for themselves what to do with it. And that was the whole point. And so, you end up getting people. I've had people on both sides, some people say, well, this is not accurate Mormon doctrine. Although I've never received any substantive criticism of the doctrine. Nobody has pointed out anything. And by the way, there's only literally three negative reviews out of 40. But, 1 or 2 reviews said, well, this is not an accurate reflection of Mormon doctrine, but they don't say why, because they wouldn't be able to. It is, in fact, in my opinion, a very fair, even-handed presentation of the doctrine. The one thing you could argue is that you could argue that some of the points in the book represent old doctrine. But even then, it's important for the reader to understand how the doctrine has evolved, where it started, where it has arrived at now. I think is very important. And even if it's old doctrine, supposedly they were prophets back then too. And they were speaking the word of God. And so I don't think that's a valid criticism, especially because I never talk about old doctrine without discussing how it has evolved and how the church's position currently is. Or I've had the opposite criticism, that it isn't hard hitting enough. That there are aspects of the doctrine that I could point out in a more negative light. And I think that's a natural reaction when I'm trying to just present the information without any kind of agenda. I don't want it to be propaganda. That's the last thing the world needs, is more propaganda, pro or con, about the Mormon Church. And that's what makes the book unique. It really is one of the few books, in my opinion, that is written in a very even-handed way. And yet, as you said, not a scholarly treatment.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of books about Mormonism that are even-handed, but they are scholarly, and the average person would never read them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I agree with what you said. I think if you're somebody who's either Mormon and you're interested in aspects of the doctrine that you don't know or maybe aren't discussed much anymore in the church, or if you're new to the religion, you're not in the religion, but you want to know more about it, it's a good introduction. Having said that, it is pretty detailed. I really try to make the style light and easy. But if you don't know one thing about the doctrine, probably the best advice would be to not bite off more than you can chew, even with this book. And that's why it's 40 chapters, self-contained. Most of the chapters are relatively short, because probably what will happen, if you don't know anything about, let's say, race and the Mormon attitude toward race, you can read that one chapter and give it the time that it needs to really digest it without getting overwhelmed.
Mm.
And once you feel comfortable with that topic, you can move on to something else that interests you.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's a great introduction to. And like I said, it's if you want to know what if you're you come from a long line of Mormon stock, and you want to know what your great grandparents and your grandparents were taught and believed, this would also be a great resource for you as well. And it also helps kind of maybe clarify things like, there was a time when Adam God doctrine was taught, and it was taught in the temple, and this we know. So if you don't know anything about Adam God, this is a good place to start. It does, like you said, doesn't overwhelm you. It's just kind of a good introduction to the topic. And like I said, it's done in a pretty objective manner. I mean, nobody can be 100% unbiased, but I felt like it was pretty close to being as objective as you could across the board on the variety of topics that are covered in the book. So, I was just thinking, I did a book review of this book, and I'll have you know that book review that I did has the second most, it's the second most viewed book review that I've done.
Astoundingly so. Yeah, I don't know why, to be honest. It's interesting about me. We talked about this a year ago. The fact that you didn't know me, I didn't know you. I didn't know you because you were new to this channel. The channel was new. And you didn't know me because I live in Europe. I've lived outside the US for almost 30 years. And so it's kind of an odd project for me to undertake, because I've been out of the church for over 30 years, and I haven't even been in touch with the culture or the community for all these years. Although I do come back, and this might be part of my my unconscious thought process. I do come back to Utah at least once a year to see my brothers and my parents. And so, of course, I'm always somewhat in touch with the topic. But, in terms of my belief system, I've been out of it for so long. Why would I write the book? And who knows me? And why would they listen to me? I'm not an expert. And then I just appear out of the blue.
Just like me.
Just like you. And there seems to be quite a bit of interest in what I have to say.
Yes.
And I think that's great. And I think it's a result of the material and of the quality of the book itself. It's obviously not because of me. And if you read the book and you just give it a chance, I think you'll find that it is a very, well written, if I say so myself, accurate presentation of the doctrine. And one other thing I want to say is, I don't actually agree completely with what you said. I agree that if you want to know what my great grandparents were taught about the doctrine, my book is a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
But this is stuff that was discussed when I was a kid.
Sure.
It wasn't that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's obscure, kind of, but not completely.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. It's always there, and it was there. It was much more present when I was younger. Not to mention when my grandparents were alive, or my great grandparents. It was there to a greater extent, even when I was a kid, than it is now, and it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
This doctrine has not been repudiated. And if it has, then I say it in the book, but most of it has not been repudiated. It's still official doctrine.
Mm.
They just don't talk about it.
Yeah, fascinating. One of the things, well, first of all, I think the reason why the book review did so well is because the name Obscure Mormon Doctrine is going to get eyeballs. And I was so, when I started season 2 of book reviews, my very first book review was Rough Stone Rolling. And then I'm doing this stuff and I'm thinking, wait a second, why don't I do book reviews of some of the people that I've had on my program? So that kind of I changed course. And I think it made your day when that thing popped up unannounced. You had no idea that was coming. And I remember getting emails from you. You were really happy about that. So I just want to say I'm so glad I was able to make your day.
It did make my day. Yeah. And I appreciate you for that. I really do. Without you, I don't know where the book would be.
Wow. That's so cool to think. So one of the reasons we're also having you come on the program is, in addition to talking about the audiobook and also just talking about the process of doing all this and then what kind of responses you got, is I also want to announce that Chris is going to be part of my Tuesday Tangent segment, where for those of you who I've done with Brent Ashworth and with Nathan Smith, where I don't even know what the topic is going in. We sit down, we shoot about some 20-minute segments. So I've invited Chris to come back. And what we're going to do is I'm going to have him in the next few weeks. We're going to sit down and we're going to do about 2, 3, 4 episodes of, he's going to pick a topic, a doctrine, whether it's in the book or maybe didn't make it into the book. And you're going to surprise me and you're going to say, okay, today I'm going to talk about this doctrine. And I'm like, okay. And then I'll just ask you questions. And I think it would make for a very fascinating segment.
Oh, absolutely. Just so you know, I'll probably go with things that are in the book, because if they didn't make it into the book, I didn't consider them to be, to rise to the level.
Got it. Yeah.
that I had imposed on myself in order to make the book, credible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to talk, just a little bit of a spoiler for these sessions, which I'm looking very forward to. I'm not going to talk about any doctrine that I don't consider to be truly church doctrine.
Got it.
But it will be lesser known beliefs, but still, bona fide doctrine.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be great to do this. I'm very excited. I was just thinking about, 500 books. I mean, I know some of the publishers that I'm basically connected to 13 publishers now. And just University of Illinois Press just jumped on. And so I have resources now where they send me books all the time. Some of these publishers I deal with, their initial print runs for books are like 500 to 700 copies. I mean, I imagine there's some publisher listening right now thinking, man, I wish we would have signed up with him.
Well, it's interesting because one of the reasons why I decided to self-publish is because I published a book previously on legal writing, which is what I do professionally. I'm a lawyer, but I teach legal writing. And I published through the biggest legal publisher. This was 20 years ago, or not 20, 15 years ago, LexisNexis. And so I had experience going through a big publisher. And that book, 12, 13 years in, has probably sold less, fewer copies than this book after 1 year. Of course, it stands to reason. It's a book about legal writing, which is even less interesting than a book on obscure Mormon doctrine. But I didn't want, for various reasons, I didn't want to go through a publisher again. They take basically all the profit. They tell you, they basically tell you how it's gonna go. They control the advertising and the promotion, and plus, I want to write some more books about legal writing that are more practical. And so I wanted to get this experience of self-publishing. So for future books, I would know how it works. And so that's been another great experience for me this last year, as I've really learned the ins and outs of self-publishing. So for people who want to self-publish, I think it's a really good option. You know, you have much more control. Of course, you have to make sure the quality's there. But I would highly recommend it.
So when I talked to you last year, I'd asked you if you were ever going to do any more books in this, and you said, no, I think I pretty much, this is what I want to do. But I'm wondering, after a year and over 500 copies sold, one, are you thinking of coming out with a second edition, or are you thinking of maybe doing another project about Mormonism now that you've seen that there's an audience, or do you think this will be your only shot?
No, this is my only shot. It's out of my system. I mean,
Okay.
it's a topic that it was extremely interesting and fascinating for me to write the book. And actually it happened over years. Literally it probably lasted 5 years, the writing of that book, because it was never my livelihood. And so it was something I turned to when I had free time. And so it's just a really fascinating hobby for me, but it's not something that I actually enjoy spending a lot of time thinking about and talking about.
Okay.
Because in my mind, I have put these questions to bed.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I think, I am going to write books about legal writing related to my profession, but I never say never, but I don't have any good idea, to be honest. I mean,
Got it.
maybe if you came up with a great idea and I liked it, I might say yes, but chances are very slim that I'll write another book about Mormonism.
So I have a question. When you were doing the research for the book, did you buy a bunch of books for research, or did you primarily go online? Were you using PDF copies of books? Or are you getting hard copies of books? Do you have this big library of books?
I bought a lot of books. I mean, if I could get the books, LDS books, these core sources that I was using, obviously I didn't have to buy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a very interesting question. I don't think I said this in the last interview. If I did, I apologize to those that are listening for the second time. But do you know, Stephen, what a triple combination is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. So I still had my triple combination from when I was baptized into the Aaronic priesthood, when I was baptized a deacon. For some reason, after all these years and being out of the church all these years, I still had it. And I had it with me over in Europe. And so I used that triple combination, ironically, more than I probably ever used it over the last 5 years writing this book. And so I had the scriptures, not counting the Bible. Of course, it's easy to find the Bible online. And then I had all of these other, what I would call core Mormon sources that I could access online, didn't have to buy. I had a copy of Mormon Doctrine from Bruce R. McConkie, like almost everybody used to have.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a good place to start. Otherwise, there's a really good book called This Is My Doctrine that I would probably consider the best book that I read in terms of helping me with my book.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it sold many copies either, probably less than mine. I mean, I think he has fewer reviews than I do.
Mm-hmm.
But, those kinds of books, I bought a lot of them. And that alone took me a few years to just go through these various books, these various resources, and really try to pin down the doctrine before I started to write.
Very interesting. Well, first of all, Chris, I just want to thank you so much for coming onto the program today. And I'm glad to get the feedback. A lot of people have told me, bought the book. I've heard from people. I get emails from people. I bought the book. One person was critical of the book, but they were like, well, I already knew all this. I'm like, yeah, but this is for dummies. This is for an introduction to the thing, But other than that, the response that I've been getting on the book has been really, really positive. And I'm so glad that you came on the program today.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'd just like to respond probably finally to that comment. I saw that comment and he and I wrote to each other. I really don't believe that even if you are really well versed in Mormon doctrine, that you would know everything that's in this book. And I know from my own experience, I grew up in the church. I was a missionary. And I guarantee that virtually without exception, there will be aspects of the doctrine in the book, no matter how knowledgeable you are, that surprise you. Or if you know it, you are a bit fuzzy. And that's the point of the book, is even for those that are really knowledgeable, if you ask them, well, how exactly does this work? They stumble a bit. And so it's very, very interesting for people like that, probably Mormon, probably devout, to really pin it down and help them understand what they believe, or what they're meant to believe as Mormons, and really get it clear. And that's what was so fun about writing the book for me. For me, it wasn't a religious experience because I don't believe it, but it was a very interesting academic experience, because I always wondered, well, how exactly does this work? Because I grew up this way. And so I would dig and finally pin it down and put it in the book basically as a service to the reader, to finally get to the bottom of these different aspects. So I can't imagine anybody reading this book and not learning at least one thing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so this was great. I really appreciate you coming on the program. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before I let you go? You think we covered everything?
I thought it would be interesting to just quickly mention how it's been fun to have the book out there. When, for example, this series Under the Banner of Heaven came out, and before that, what was it called? Murder
Among the Mormons.
Murder Among the Mormons. And so it's fun when these series come out, and then I get some feedback. So for example, with Under the Banner of Heaven, they talked a lot about blood atonement.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, there's a chapter on blood atonement in my book, and so I actually got a lot of feedback about that, and so that's been fun.
I did want to ask you another question. You said that you got 40,000 pages or 40,000 pages read.
40,000 Kindle pages read.
Okay, so do you get money for that too?
Yeah, you get money for that too. I don't know exactly how it breaks down, but yeah, you get a percentage from the fund.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Well, thank you for giving us the behind the scenes. I love this, dude.
Yeah, you're welcome. And if you were watching that series, and especially if you weren't LDS, you'd want to know more about blood atonement. And so that probably contributed to some of the sales of the book. Because if you typed in blood atonement to Amazon, that book would come up. So that's been fun.
That's great. Well, hey, this has been great. Two unknown guys. Nobody knew who we were a year ago. Now a lot of people know who we are. And it's really cool that we've kind of taken this journey together. It's been fun, and I look forward to doing our Tuesday Tangents segments.
I'm looking very forward to it, Stephen.
So I just want to remind my audience to don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification button to be informed when a new video comes out. We are on all the major podcast formats now. And we are working on getting the podcast caught up. We had a little snafu a couple weeks ago. So now about 25% of the audience is now listening to us on the podcast as well. So thank you very much. Also support us on Patreon, PayPal. There will be links in the description. Don't forget merch store and on MormonBookReviews.com. Again, everybody, thank you so much for watching the program, and you all have yourself a great day.